about Meghan Markle's trip to Texas in what can only really be described, I think, as a ill-gotten or ill-conceived publicity stunt that I think's kind of gone horribly awry for her. And I know a lot of people said, well, she's being compassionate, she wants to grieve with these families, she's a mother, yada yada yada. However, I really think when you look at this objectively, I think there are several kind of key warning signs that this is not done purely for altruistic motives. And I think the media caught on to that a bit and has kind of backed off from the story in a way, I think out of concerns, perhaps for her own reputation. Because irregardless of how well-intentioned this was, it just looked like a publicity stunt. Regardless of, whether you like Meghan or don't like Meghan, this just came off looking exceptionally bad for her. And I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why I think that is, and listen to the end and let me know what you think of my conclusions. So if you guys haven't...
It's all very, very strange, but it smacks to me of a woman who is lost, who is desperately trying to find something to do, something that will make her lots of money, but can't quite do that. It's almost sad to see.
Kev, Meghan uploads this video after the New York trip because she's heading to Washington, D.C. for for some other prestigious event that she doesn't belong at. And it's interesting to watch her recap video of New York because this trip to NYC was meant to highlight Meghan's alleged work related to mental health and the tragic death of children.
Using her titles and using anything she can to gain relevancy. But it hasn't really achieved, I think, what she wanted it to achieve. I think she wanted it to achieve this rebrand for her. She wanted everyone to love her. She wanted to be the Gwyneth Paltrow style of influencer. But every time she posts something, it just doesn't quite hit the mark. It doesn't quite do what it needs to do or needs to achieve.
But this is the modern way, isn't it, Arthur? Is to prevent other people taking pictures of you or using other pictures. You take your own picture. If you're a celebrity, you take your own pictures, you curate them carefully, and you put them out on social media. This is what celebrities do in your business.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they like to have them airbrushed, and they like to have them, made to look their very best. Well, Meghan. I mean, Meghan's a good-looking girl. She's and she knows it as well, and
Chuck Norris had died 2 days earlier. The memorial was private, invitation only, old school Hollywood, the kind of room where the guest list is decided by men who still call each other kid and mean it. And then she walked in. Meghan Markle, black dress, oversized sunglasses indoors, like she was auditioning for The Widow, not mourning a legend. Let's be absolutely clear about what happened next, because the clips are already being scrubbed, the witnesses are being threatened with NDAs, and the Sussex PR machine is working triple shifts to memory hole the entire evening. But some of us were there, some of us saw it with our own eyes. And what we saw was the exact moment Hollywood drew a line in the sand, and Meghan discovered she was on the wrong side of it. Picture the scene. The Dolby Theatre, backstage green room turned wake, no press allowed, phones surrendered at the door, just 80 of the toughest, most loyal men and women this town ever produced. Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Van Damme, Lundgren, even Clint Eastwood made the trip, 94 years old, sitting in the corner like a statue that learned how to smoke. Chuck's empty cowboy hat on a stool center stage, a single spotlight on it, that was the entire set design, that was all any of us needed. And then the side door opens. Click-clack of Laubautins on concrete. Every head turns. Meghan. Alone. No Harry, no security you can see, just her, and that tight little smile that says, I belong here more than any of you. You could feel the temperature drop 10 degrees. Schwarzenegger actually muttered, what the hell is this, in that Austrian accent that still scares people. Stallone's 78 years old, 3 hip replacements, still built like a tank, stands up so fast his chair scrapes back like a gunshot. And Meghan, God love her, she keeps walking, straight toward the front row, straight toward Chuck's family. She's 20 feet away when Stallone steps into her path. And this is the part the Sussex squad will never let you see. Stallone doesn't shout, he doesn't need to. He just looks at her and says, 4 words, perfectly calm. You weren't invited, sweetheart. Dead silence. Then he turns to the security guy, ex-Navy SEAL, 6'5", arms like bridge cables, and says louder. Get her out. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the sound of 1,000 bridges burning at once. Because when Sylvester Stallone, the man who wrote Rocky in 3 days, the man who carried an entire studio on his back for 40 years, when that man calls security on you, you're not just persona non grata, you're radioactive. But let's not pretend this was about Chuck Norris. Chuck was the excuse. This was about every red carpet she photobombed, every veteran actor she cornered at a party to pitch her Netflix show, every I Know opera name drop that made people's eyes glaze over. This was payback for the time she allegedly told Tom Cruise his Scientology was so last century to his face at a CAA party. This was payback for the Netflix deal that collapsed, the Spotify deal that imploded, the Lemonada deal that's currently circling the drain. This was Hollywood saying, quietly, politely, the way only Hollywood can, we are done carrying you. And the best part, the absolute best part. She tried to play the victim on the way out. Witnesses heard her hissing at security, "Do you know who I am?" The guard, bless him, didn't even blink. "Yeah," he said, "that's why you're leaving." I want you to think about that for a second. Meghan Markle, former royal, Duchess of Sussex, woman who once made the Queen of England flinch, reduced to arguing with a hired bodyguard.
I've been to Royal News Network before. My name is Brittany. We talk about kind of everything related to royals here. So that's news, gossip, fashion, jewelry, television shows, movies, and history. We do it all here. So if you want to subscribe, that will be great. And next week, I will be in London for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and I will be basically showcasing the whole thing. I have a whole video describing all the different things I'm going to do. And so if you are interested in following along on that journey, I will have a ton of content, even about, Harry and Meghan, seeing how the public reacts to them, the crowds. I'm super curious about that. So if you guys want to hit the subscribe button, that would be fantastic. And like I said, today we're talking about, something very serious and I think very kind of critical to understanding how royals function. And that is this tragedy in Uvalde, Texas, where a gunman killed 19 children and 2 school teachers in an elementary school, which is, horribly and utterly tragic. It is a terrible thing to have happened. And yet somehow Meghan Markle is there kind of remembering the kids. It's just very weird. So first warning signs. We also obviously saw some of the pictures come out yesterday. It was kind of a memorial, as I understand, kind of in the kind of town square near the courthouse. And she showed up and there were obviously a crowd of photographers already there. Now, I don't know exactly what the makeup of this is because obviously there's a lot of media in the area to capture, news conferences, events, kind of those sort of things connected to it to kind of educate the broader public about what has happened. And Meghan showed up to lay flowers, and she, I guess, chose one particular cross to lay them by, and we got several very, very clear pictures of her. So this wasn't like a member of the crowd who happened to see her there. It basically just seemed to be solely photographers at this location.
That's not just humiliation, that's biblical. But here's what fascinates me most. She didn't have to be there. Harry wasn't invited either. He's in Britain, reportedly furious but powerless, hiding at some mate's estate in Gloucestershire because even he knows this one's radioactive. She came alone. She chose to GateCrash a memorial for a man who once said, on record, that he'd rather be waterboarded than appear on her Archetypes podcast. Think about the level of delusion required. These people weren't her friends, they weren't her colleagues, they barely tolerated her when she had a crown and a title. Now she's just the woman who bullied staff, leaked private letters, and cried racism every time someone asked her to curtsy. And yet she still thought, genuinely believed, that if she just showed up in a £4,000 black dress and the right amount of sympathetic lip quiver, they'd roll out the red carpet. That's not confidence, that's clinical narcissism. The kind that makes you walk into a room full of action heroes, who have collectively killed 10,000 men on screen, and think they're going to bow. She stood there, sunglasses still on, as security formed a human wall. One witness told me she tried to pull the "I lost my friend too" card. Chuck Norris, the man who once joked that the only reason he'd ever meet Meghan was if she played the villain in Expendables 6. Lost her friend. The delusion is breathtaking. And then the murmuring started. Not loud, not dramatic, just old men, tough men, men who have seen everything, whispering the same thing. She's not supposed to be here. Nobody wants her here. Not at Chuck's thing, not anywhere. That wasn't gossip, that was verdict. You know what the worst part is? She still doesn't get it. This very morning, Page 6 got a tip that her team is furious about the way she was treated, that they're considering legal options against Stallone for assault. Assault? Because a 78-year-old man asked security to do the job they're paid $1,000 an hour to do. Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Stallone looked at her funny and said words that hurt her feelings. Lock him up, throw away the key. Meanwhile, the rest of Hollywood is quietly toasting Sly like he just won an Oscar, a Nobel Prize, and the lottery all at once. Because he did what none of them had the stones to do. He said no, out loud, in front of God and everybody.
Harry and Meghan were going to be awarded Humanitarians of the Year trophies by Project Healthy Minds. I mean, that's just a joke. But Project Healthy Minds, is a serious organisation that does good work. It is about children who have suffered due to mental health, due to online harm, a kind of area that Harry and Meghan are supposed to be active in. Although, apart from a launch video, we can't find any evidence that they've actually ever done anything. But anyway, they go up to collect these awards. We laughed at the fact they're getting these awards. Harry would go to the end of the earth to pick up any old award. Who can forget his Legend of Aviation award that he collected from John Travolta in Beverly Hills, Hollywood, when he couldn't even pass his helicopter pilot's test. He's not even a pilot. It's ridiculous. This guy will take a gong from anyone because he wants to look good in the papers, wants to look good on TV. He's got no shame like that. So we're laughing at Harry and Meghan getting these thoroughly undeserved Humanitarian of the Year awards. That's funny. But the work that Project Healthy Minds does is not funny. It's serious. It's important. And there's Meghan turning it into some sort of glamour trip. And when you see that long line of high heels and her walk-in wardrobe and her lipstick, you think, what happened to the domestic goddess who just liked pottering around on her beehives, making honey and jam? What happened to that? Oh, we're moving into another phase now. And the other thing to note about these videos, of course, is this kind of real pathetic walk-on bit part that Harry plays, standing around in the background while the star of the show hogs the limelight.
That, Meghan, is why you will never recover from this. Not because Stallone embarrassed you, but because he proved, in front of the only audience that ever really mattered to you, that your currency is worthless now. The titles, gone, the royal connections, severed, the Hollywood access, revoked permanently, publicly, and with extreme prejudice. You are no longer a player, you're a punchline. And the worst part, even the punchlines don't want you stealing their spotlight. So here we are. Chuck Norris is dead, Sylvester Stallone is a hero twice over. And Meghan Markle just discovered that some doors, once slammed in your face by the right man at the right time, stay locked forever. There's a particular kind of silence that happens when someone crosses a line they didn't even know existed. It's not the silence of shock, it's not the silence of confusion. It's the silence of collective realization, the moment when everyone in the room simultaneously understands that they're watching someone destroy themselves in real time. That's the silence that filled the room when Meghan Markle walked uninvited into Chuck Norris's memorial service. And that's the silence that followed her all the way back out. Welcome to the story nobody in Hollywood wants you to hear. The story about the night the entertainment industry finally stopped pretending, stopped being polite, stopped playing along with the charade. The night Sylvester Stallone called security on the Duchess of Delusion. Let me paint you a picture of what actually happened, because by the time this reaches the mainstream press, it'll be sanitized, repackaged, and sold back to you as a misunderstanding, a cultural clash, a regrettable incident blown out of proportion. But those of us who understand how power actually works in this town, we know exactly what we witnessed. We witnessed an execution. Social, professional, complete. Chuck Norris passed away on a Tuesday. By Wednesday evening, Hollywood's old guard had organized a private tribute, not a publicity event, not a networking opportunity, a genuine gathering of people who actually knew the man, who worked with him, who respected him. The location was kept deliberately vague, invitation only, no plus ones, no exceptions. And somehow, inexplicably, Meghan Markle got the address. Now, let's be crystal clear about something. Security at these events doesn't fail accidentally. These aren't college interns checking names off a clipboard. These are former Secret Service agents who have protected presidents, former Mossad operatives who have extracted hostages from war zones. If someone gets into a room they're not supposed to be in, it's because someone else wanted them there. Wanted to see what would happen, wanted to watch the fireworks. Someone set Meghan up. And she walked right into it. Picture her arrival. The venue is a private estate in Bel Air, gated, guarded, the kind of place where even Google Maps gives up and shows blank space. A town car pulls up, California plates, rental, not even a proper car service. Out steps Meghan, solo, dressed like she's attending the Oscars, not awake, hair professionally blown out, makeup camera ready, that practiced expression of solemn concern that she's workshopped in the mirror 1,000 times.
She just wants to make us believe that everything in Montecito is great, and it's not. And you know, about the Instagram page, you know, she's only going to put what she wants to put, and quite honestly, I can't be bothered to looking at it. It just
so boring.
Boring, yeah.
Do you think it's increasing or decreasing Harry and Meghan's popularity?
I think their popularity is in the cellar at the moment. Quite honestly, I really do. I think, as I said last time we did this show, Matt, if Harry had said in that BBC interview, "I'm sorry," you know, we might start thinking there could be a reconciliation. But at the moment, all I'm seeing is him, as you said earlier, acting the victim. And quite honestly, the victim here isn't Harry and isn't Meghan. You know, they're the people that have just abused their position that they had. And you know, I mean, moment the late Queen died, they made their daughter a princess and their son a prince, and yet we never see these royal children. We never see their faces. We never see how they look. You know, we just get what Meghan wants to give us and back views. And why is that? Because maybe she wants to monetize the pictures of the children at some stage, and she sees that as a big deal. You know, and she's American, and that's the way they work in America. You know, they think that's the next big deal, and maybe she's got that worked out already.
Well, I mentioned there about popularity. There was, just before we sat down, there was a YouGov poll that was released on royal family favourability. And obviously they're not elected, they're not politicians, so we don't have elections to find out who is the most popular. So it's very hard to know. Yeah. But once again, William and Catherine remain Britain's favourite royals, closely followed by the King. Yep. The King, 6 in 10 have a positive opinion of King Charles. But William and Catherine were way ahead.
She's wearing black, of course, but it's the wrong kind of black. Too tight, too expensive, too look at me for a room full of people trying to remember a dead friend. The first guard doesn't stop her, just radios ahead, smirks slightly, he knows what's coming. She walks through the garden, past the fountain, past the men smoking cigars in small clusters, talking in low voices about stunts gone wrong and bar fights in Bangkok. They stop talking as she passes, just stop and stare. Not with recognition, not with interest. With the same expression you'd give a rat that somehow wandered into a wedding reception. She doesn't notice, or pretends not to. That's the thing about Meghan, she's so accustomed to interpreting every reaction as awe that she's lost the ability to recognize contempt. She reaches the main room, 80 people, legends, Arnold Schwarzenegger sitting next to Wesley Snipes, Dolph Lundgren comparing scars with Jean-Claude Van Damme, Clint Eastwood in the corner looking like death personified, nursing what's probably his 4th whiskey. And at the center of it all, Sylvester Stallone, standing guard over Chuck's empty chair like a centurion at a tomb. Meghan walks in. Every conversation stops mid-sentence. You could hear ice melting in glasses. She does that thing she always does, the Diana head tilt, the vulnerable smile, the slight hand flutter that's meant to convey, I'm just as surprised to be here as you are, but isn't this lovely? Nobody smiles back. Arnold actually turns his entire body away from her, deliberately, conspicuously, the kind of cut direct that would make a Victorian Duchess gasp. But Meghan keeps walking, because stopping now would mean acknowledging that she's made a mistake, and Meghan Markle has never, in her entire calculated life, admitted to making a mistake. She's heading for the front, for the family section. For Chuck's widow and children, people she's never met, has no connection to, has no business approaching. That's when Stallone moves. Not quickly, not aggressively, with the calm, measured pace of a man who's been in 1,000 fights and knows exactly how this one ends. He steps directly into her path, doesn't touch her, doesn't need to. Just stands there, all 5'9" of concentrated granite and legitimate accomplishment. And he says, quietly, so only the front 3 rows can hear. This is a private event, for friends, you need to leave. Meghan's smile doesn't falter, it freezes, like a computer program encountering an error it wasn't coded to handle. I'm so sorry for your loss, she says, projecting her voice now, trying to include the whole room in the conversation. Chuck was such an inspiration. You never met him, Stallone interrupts, flat, factual, devastating. Well, no, but his work. You're not invited, you're not wanted, and you're leaving now. The room is so quiet you can hear someone's pacemaker. Meghan tries a different tactic. The eyes get wider, the voice gets smaller, the Diana trick weaponized. I don't understand why you're being so hostile. I came to pay my respects. And this is the moment that will be studied in PR courses for decades. Stallone doesn't raise his voice, doesn't lose his temper, just turns to the security team waiting by the door and says, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Gentlemen, the Duchess is lost. Please help her find the exit." Not throw her out, not remove her. Help her find the exit. The professional courtesy of it, the surgical precision, the absolute contempt wrapped in impeccable manners. 2 guards appear at her elbows, not touching, just present, looming, making it very clear that the next move is hers and all of them are bad.
And you can debate whether, hey, they were already there, and she just happened to show up. But my question is, if this was truly about just being charitable, being mournful, investing in the community, did it really matter that Meghan put the flowers there? Or could her assistant have done it and her sat in the car and nobody would know? Because if it was supposed to be a private visit, as they are alleging, there's no reason why Meghan couldn't have just sat in the car and had her assistant doing it. Because what she does when she is there, when these pictures were released, all of a sudden the narrative went from these children who were killed in this horrific manner and the teachers and a husband of one of the teachers who died, many are saying of a broken heart, of a heart attack because of this tragedy. It all of a sudden became, why the heck is Meghan Markle in Texas? And even if she had the best intentions, what ended up happening is that she all of a sudden invested herself in this narrative of this tragedy. And it's one thing for somebody like Matthew McConaughey to have that happen to him, because that is actually his hometown. So he's actually from that area. He's from Texas. So if his name gets mentioned in a story, that makes sense. And if I saw him there, I wouldn't actually be as surprised or be as frustrated, because this is his hometown. He has invested time and, some of his background in there. So we know that, him going there makes sense. But so far as we've known it, he's actually stayed away. And I think that's important, because what she does when she came there is she kind of created this circus about herself, because it's it immediately became, is Netflix there? Is a photographer there for her? Is, she has her security there, and I'll go into the security guy here in a minute. But, all of a sudden, all the media focus went from this town and this tragedy to Meghan Markle. And again, they said in a statement, in her personal capacity as a mother, in order to offer her condolences and support.
And Meghan, faced with the choice between leaving quietly or being physically escorted out in front of Hollywood's A-list, finally understands the position she's in. Her face does something interesting. The mask slips just for a second, and underneath there's not embarrassment, not shame. There's rage. Pure incandescent fury that these people, these mere actors, these expendable celebrities, dare to treat her this way. Her, the woman who married a prince, the woman who sat down with Oprah, the woman who was on the cover of Time magazine. But she turns, because even Meghan knows when she's lost. As she walks toward the exit, someone in the crowd, nobody will say who, mutters just loud enough to be heard, "She wasn't supposed to be here." And someone else responds, "Nobody in Hollywood wants her here." It spreads like wildfire, the murmuring, the confirmation, the permission structure for everyone to finally say out loud what they've been thinking for years. She's poison, she's toxic, she's a user, a climber, a remora fish that attaches itself to anything with power and sucks until there's nothing left. And Hollywood, collectively in that room on that night, decided they were done being fed upon. Meghan reaches the door, turns back, one last attempt at controlling the narrative. "This is incredibly disrespectful," she says, voice shaking now. Whether from anger or performance, nobody cares enough to determine. Clint Eastwood, remember, 94 years old, half-deaf, mostly drunk, chooses this moment to speak for the first time all evening. "You'd know all about disrespect, wouldn't you, sweetheart?" The room erupts, not in laughter, worse, in agreement, murmurs of approval, nods, the kind of consensus that ends careers. And Meghan leaves. The door closes behind her. And the memorial continues as if she was never there, because in the ways that matter, she wasn't. Here's what happened next, in the hours and days that followed. Meghan's team went into crisis mode. They leaked to their preferred outlets that she'd been verbally assaulted by aggressive men who felt threatened by a strong woman of color. The problem, too many people were there, too many witnesses, too many people who know how Hollywood actually works. Within 6 hours, 3 separate sources confirmed to Variety that Meghan crashed the event uninvited. By the next morning, Page 6 had the full story, including the Clint Eastwood quote. Meghan's lawyer sent cease and desist letters, threatened defamation suits, demanded retractions. Nobody blinked. Because Sylvester Stallone, bless him, released a statement so perfectly calibrated it should be taught in law schools. Last night's event was a private memorial for a dear friend. Attendance was by invitation only. We're grateful to all who were invited and attended. We hope everyone else respects the privacy of Chuck's family during this difficult time. Polite, professional, and absolutely murderous. He didn't mention Meghan by name, didn't need to. Everyone knew exactly who everyone else meant. And just like that, the narrative was set. Meghan crashed, Meghan was removed, Meghan embarrassed herself. Even the Sussex squad couldn't spin this one. They tried, oh how they tried. Twitter melted down with claims of racism, sexism, conspiracy theories involving the palace and the CIA. But Hollywood didn't care, because Hollywood has actual power, actual money, actual influence. And Hollywood had decided Meghan was out. Since that night, not a single A-list event has included her. Not one. The invitations dried up instantly. The Oscars, not even as a presenter. The Met Gala, Anna Wintour would rather wear polyester. The Golden Globes, they'd sooner nominate a TikTok influencer. The doors are closed, locked, and Sylvester Stallone is standing guard. Because that's the thing about real power. It doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to explain, doesn't need to justify. It just says no. And everyone else falls in line. Meghan spent years believing she could manifest her way into Hollywood royalty. That if she just acted like she belonged, eventually
I
everyone
think
would
that
believe
that's
it
a
too.
fair assessment, that she knew that being in Paris would attract a lot of attention. And that's why the idea of her kicking her feet up and recording herself passing the death tunnel is even more sinister feeling. It's so funny that you talk about Princeharry in the background, because all I thought of when I saw that video of Princeharry was, something tells me Harry spends a lot of time in sweatpants. He's like standing there in
told me
sweatpants,
that.
and I'm like, yeah, because he's a loser.
Yeah,
Get a
he's
job, Harry.
Yeah, he's a sweatpants kind of a guy. But when he goes out, he really smartens up. He puts a pair of chucker boots and chinos on and a polo
Well,
shirt.
he started his body is starting to give a little Prince Andrew. So maybe he needs to spend some more time on the beach. I know that that's so mean of me to comment, but I was like, he's starting to look like his older relatives when I saw him on the carpet. I also noticed in that video, Gloria Steinem, does she even realize that Meghan is recording her, creepily recording her eating sushi? Did you see that very last shot at the end? I'm thinking, what are you asking people permission before you record them while they're trying to privately eat sushi? What is the objective here? But you're right. There's a beauty or a couture pivot happening, because I looked at the copious amounts of makeup capsules that I did not recognize. I don't recognize them from the Neiman Marcus beauty section or from walking through a Nordstrom. I don't recognize those beauty capsules. So I wondered, and especially the way she's using the same beauty capsule backstage at that event. She lingers on these beauty capsules in this video. And she has previously said that she would consider going into not only fashion, but beauty.
But she forgot something crucial. Hollywood isn't the British royal family. You can't bully your way in, can't cry racism when people see through you, can't leak stories to a mid-Scobie and expect the industry to bend. Hollywood respects one thing: results. Box office, ratings, talent, work. And Meghan has none of it. Her podcast flopped, her Netflix show flopped, every project she touches turns to ash because at her core. She's not an artist, she's not a storyteller. She's a climber, and everyone can tell. That night at Chuck Norris's memorial, surrounded by people who have actually earned their place in this town, Meghan came face to face with her own irrelevance. And Sylvester Stallone, a man who was rejected 60 times before someone took a chance on Rocky, looked her in the eye and delivered the verdict. You don't belong here. You never did. And you never will. The night Meghan Markle tried to gatecrash Chuck Norris's memorial service and got personally ejected by Sylvester Stallone in front of the most powerful people in the action movie business. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. It's not what happened, it's why it happened. And more importantly, what it reveals about a woman who has spent the last 7 years carefully constructing a public persona that finally, catastrophically, collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. Because this wasn't just a social faux pas, this wasn't just bad timing or a misunderstanding. This was the inevitable conclusion of a personality disorder playing out on the world stage. Let me take you back to the beginning, not of this story, of Meghan's entire Hollywood experience. Because you can't understand what happened at that memorial without understanding the path that led her there. Meghan Markle arrived in Los Angeles with dreams. That's fine, everyone does. Millions of beautiful, talented, ambitious young women step off buses and planes every year thinking they'll be the exception. Most of them learn humility, learn craft, learn that talent matters and connections help, but persistence is everything. Meghan learned something different. She learned that if you can't earn your way in, you married your way in. Her first significant relationship in Hollywood was with Trevor Engelson, producer, connected, useful. She married him in 2011, used his connections, got meetings she hadn't earned, landed a cable TV show on the strength of who she was sleeping with. Then she got famous, not A-list famous, not movie star famous, cable TV supporting character famous. And the moment she didn't need Trevor anymore, gone, mailed her wedding rings back to him, ghosted him so thoroughly he found out his marriage was over from a tabloid. That's not ruthlessness, that's sociopathy. But it worked. She had suits, she had recognition, she had a platform. But she was still nobody by Hollywood standards, still a C-lister at best, still getting rejected for movie roles, still watching actresses with half her ambition and twice her talent lap her on the way to actual stardom. So she pivoted. She started a lifestyle blog, The TIG, Aspirational Poverty for Rich People, photographs of herself looking thoughtful while holding expensive coffee, profound captions about finding your authentic self while wearing $1,000 bracelets. It got attention, the right kind, the kind that attracts other social climbers. And then she met Harry. You know the rest of that story, the whirlwind romance, the wedding, the tidal wave of positive press. For exactly 18 months, Meghan Markle was the most famous woman on earth. And she thought it would last forever. That's the thing about narcissists, they can't conceive of consequences, can't imagine that people will eventually see through them, can't fathom that their behavior creates patterns that observant people notice. The royal family noticed, the staff noticed, the British press noticed. And when it all came crashing down, when the bullying allegations emerged, when the family members started briefing against her, when even Oprah's primetime special couldn't rebuild her image, Meghan did what she always does. She ran back to Hollywood. Except Hollywood had been watching, and Hollywood had taken notes. Netflix gave her money because of her name, not her talent. Spotify gave her a podcast because of her title, not her ideas. Every door that opened did so because she was a duchess, not because she was any good. And slowly, painfully, publicly, every single one of those deals fell apart. The Netflix content was unwatchable, the Spotify podcast was unlistenable, the book deals evaporated, the speaking engagements dried up. And Meghan, faced with the reality that she has no actual skills beyond social climbing and playing the victim, became increasingly desperate. Which brings us to Chuck Norris's memorial. Chuck died on a Tuesday morning. Heart attack, quick, he was 84. He'd lived a full life, done incredible work, built genuine friendships with people who mattered. Within hours, Sylvester Stallone had organized a private memorial for the following evening. Small, intimate, the old guard, people who'd actually known Chuck, actually worked with him, actually gave a damn beyond the photo opportunity. The guest list was 40 people. By the time of the actual event, it had grown to 80. Word spreads in Hollywood, but only to the people who matter. Meghan was not on any version of that list. But Meghan...
She was quite ill and she looked tired, and then now we get to see this lovely lady just walking around Scotland. It was just brilliant. So no, I think it's a great thing. And as far as I think Catherine's a very good photographer as well, and she's got the eye for it, and she looks wonderful. So I think it's brilliant, and I hope the other 3 videos that come are just as good.
Yeah, well, I imagine this is something that's she'll get more confidence, or the Wales will get more confident now in producing these videos, and I think we're going to get more and more of them telling their stories on Instagram in the same way that Meghan and Harry are telling us their love story on Instagram. So we're just going to have to be on our phones the whole time trying to find out what's going on both sides of the Atlantic, sadly.
Beyonce concert versus the hills of England.
No comparison.
Yeah.
No.
Last week, Arthur, we were on with Robert Jobson, and we had a really good chat, I think, about the King and everything that he's gone through, and everything, the kind of achievements that he's succeeded in the last couple of years. You were a keen viewer, I imagine, of his VE Day speech.
I was, yeah. I thought it was pretty brilliant, actually. I thought, he used it to talk about, war and peace and the things he cares about. Yeah, I thought that was the best part of the concert, actually. I thought, when after that, it all sort of just, for me, was a bit boring. I thought, they needed some of the old veteran rockers like Tom Jones and probably Rod Stewart, to liven it up at the end. But, watching Dad's Army was funny, but the King's speech was, it was excellent. I think he made the point very much that, the world is in turmoil at the moment. We've got India and Pakistan, we've got Israel and, of course, Ukraine. So it's no fun now. Every time you pick the papers up, it's just misery everywhere, and people, and Gaza.
Heard about it, probably from some junior agent trying to score points by feeding her information, probably from some hanger-on who thought telling her would curry favour. And Meghan made a decision. She was going to show up anyway. Now think about the psychology of that choice for a moment. Really think about it. You're not invited to a private memorial service for someone you never met. You have no connection to the deceased, no relationship with the family, no friendship with anyone attending. A normal person would send flowers, write a condolence note, make a donation to Chuck's favorite charity. But Meghan isn't normal. Meghan saw an opportunity, a room full of Hollywood power players, a solemn occasion where people would be vulnerable, emotional, off guard, a chance to remind everyone that she exists, that she matters, that she deserves a seat at the table. So she got dressed, spent 3 hours with hair and makeup, selected a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, called a car service, and showed up uninvited to a dead man's memorial service to network. Let that sink in. The venue was a private residence in the Hollywood Hills, old money, the kind of place that's been in the same family since 1947, the kind of place where even the gardeners have SAG cards. Security was tight but not ostentatious. 2 men at the gate, earpieces, clipboard, professional. Meghan's car pulls up, she gives her name. The guard checks the list, checks it again, radios to someone inside. There's a pause, a long one. Then the guard leans down to her window and says, "Ma'am, I don't have you on the list." And Meghan does what Meghan always does, she weaponizes her status. "I'm the Duchess of Sussex," she says, not as clarification, as threat. The guard doesn't blink, doesn't care. He's worked security for 40 years. He's thrown out actual A-listers. He's unmoved by titles. "Yes, ma'am, I still don't have you on the list." Another pause, you can see Meghan calculating, deciding whether to make a scene at the gate or try a different approach. She tries charm, the smile, the head tilt. There must be some mistake, I'm sure if you check with Sylvester. "Mr. Stallone created the list personally, ma'am. If you're not on it, you're not coming in." This is where a reasonable person would leave. Apologize for the confusion, drive away, preserve some dignity. Meghan calls someone, right there, in front of the guard, probably her publicist, probably her assistant, someone she thinks is pull. The guard watches, expressionless. He's seen this before, the entitlement, the desperation masquerading as confidence. Whatever conversation Meghan has, it ends with her face flushed, angry, but she puts the phone away. And then she does something truly remarkable. She gets out of the car and starts walking toward the house. Just walks past the guard, up the driveway, like if she just pretends hard enough, reality will bend to accommodate her. The guard radios ahead, doesn't chase her, doesn't need to, he knows what's waiting inside. Meghan makes it halfway up the drive before 2 more security personnel appear, larger, less polite. They don't touch her, just position themselves in her path, human walls. "Ma'am, this is private property, you need to leave." And Meghan, God bless her, tries to go around them. Actually tries to physically circumvent 2 former Marines who outweigh her by a combined 400 pounds. One of them, and this is confirmed by 3 separate sources, actually laughs, not meanly, just in disbelief, in genuine shock that someone could be this delusional. That's when someone from inside the house comes out. Not Stallone, not yet, just one of the organizers, a producer who's worked with Chuck on 6 films, a man with actual gravitas and actual patience. He approaches Meghan with the kind of careful body language you'd use with a confused elderly person. "Ms. Markle, this is a private event, for close friends and family. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." "I knew Chuck," Meghan says, and you can hear the desperation now, the need to justify her presence. "We spoke several times." "When was that?" Silent. "Where did you meet?" Maury silent. Because of course she's lying, of course she never met him. Chuck Norris famously avoided Hollywood social events, lived in Texas, kept to himself. The chances of him crossing paths with Meghan Markle were approximately 0. And she's just been caught in the lie. The producer sighs, not angry, tired. "Ms. Markle, you need to leave, now, or we'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing." And that finally breaks through. Not the embarrassment, not the rejection, the threat of police involvement, the threat of it becoming public, of TMZ getting photos of her being escorted off property by cops. She turns to leave. But she can't help herself, can't resist one final attempt to control the narrative. "This is incredibly rude," she says, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. Chuck would be ashamed of how his friends are behaving. And that's when Sylvester Stallone himself appears in the doorway. He's been watching, waiting, letting his people handle it, but that comment, that presumption, that's too much. He walks down the driveway, not quickly, deliberately, every eye in the house is watching now through windows. He stops 10 feet from Meghan, looks at her like she's something unpleasant he stepped in. Chuck would be ashamed, his voice is quiet, controlled, lethal. "You didn't know Chuck, you've never done anything Chuck respected. You show up uninvited to his memorial to take selfies and make contacts, and you have the audacity to invoke his name." Meghan opens her mouth, nothing comes out. "You're a user," Stallone continues. "Everyone in this town knows it. Everyone in this town is tired of it, and if I ever see you at another private event, I won't be this polite." He turns to security, get her off the property, if she refuses, call the police. And then he walks back inside, doesn't wait for a response, doesn't need to. The security team moves in, not touching, just encouraging, making it very clear that the conversation is over. Meghan walks back to her car, back straight, head high, the princess exit. But her hands are shaking. The car drives away. And inside the house, Sylvester Stallone returns to Chuck's memorial, returns to people who actually belonged there. Someone asks if everything's okay. Just took out the trash, Stallone says. And everyone understands exactly what he means. The murmuring started immediately, not gossip, confirmation. She wasn't supposed to be here. Nobody in Hollywood wants her here. About time someone said it to her face. By midnight, everyone in Hollywood knew what happened. By morning, it was a legend. Meghan's team tried damage control, leaked stories about how she was personally invited and then disinvited due to political pressure from the palace. Nobody believed it, too many witnesses, too many people who saw her try to force her way in. The Sussex squad tried their usual tactics, cried racism, cried misogyny, cried conspiracy. But Hollywood doesn't care about Twitter. Hollywood cares about power, and Meghan just demonstrated she has none. Since that night, she's been frozen out completely, not just from events, from consideration, from conversation. She doesn't exist anymore in the industry. She's a ghost, a cautionary tale. The woman who thought a title made her matter. The woman who thought she could fake her way to the top. The woman who finally met someone who didn't care about her victim narrative and told her the truth.
In person to a community experiencing unimaginable grief. Now, obviously, all of us can, sympathize with that statement. We all empathize with what's going on there. It's such a horrific tragedy. We are mournful. But my question to Meghan is, well, what other capacity would you be there in? You are not a princess of the United States. You have no business being there. This is a time for politicians, leaders, the community, law enforcement. I mean, there is a whole situation going on behind the scenes that you have nothing to do with, and you represent nothing but your own business interests. And that's the problem, because Meghan no longer represents something greater than herself. When you are a royal, you represent your monarchy, your country. Meghan Markle represents nothing but Meghan Markle and Prince Harry and their brand Archwell, their production deals, Netflix, Spotify. That's what she represents now. She doesn't represent something greater, because anytime the royals show up, they represent a deeper and a cultural significance. There's a deep connection to the people and the royals oftentimes. Meghan Markle, she represents nothing. So of course she's there in her personal capacity. There's no other reason for her to be there except for she decided that she needs to be there. It's just really, really quite bizarre. And what also happened in that kind of little interaction in that little courtyard there where she laid the flowers is that there was a massive bodyguard behind her. And as it's been reported, this bodyguard used to work for Michael Jackson. And I found this fascinating, and I want to go into kind of greater detail on this because I find it really interesting, is that Harry and Meghan keep hiring these uber elite people in Hollywood, like the creme de la creme. I mean, they must be paying these people enormous six-figure salaries to work for them. And
you know what separates true Hollywood royalty from pretenders? True royalty doesn't need to announce themselves, doesn't need to force their way into rooms, doesn't need to remind people of their importance. They just are. And then there's Meghan Markle, the woman who crashed Chuck Norris's memorial service and got physically removed by Sylvester Stallone. But before we get to that glorious disaster, and trust me, we will dissect every excruciating detail, we need to understand something fundamental about how Meghan's mind works. Because what happened that night wasn't an accident, wasn't a misunderstanding, wasn't a tragic confluence of miscommunication. It was inevitable. The natural endpoint of a personality, so divorced from reality that it genuinely cannot distinguish between confidence and delusion. Let's start with a question nobody in the mainstream media wants to ask. What kind of person shows up uninvited to a funeral? Not a memorial service weeks later, not a public celebration of life, a private, intimate gathering of genuine friends mourning a genuine loss. What kind of person looks at that situation and thinks, yes, this is my moment? I'll tell you what kind. Someone who views every human interaction as a transaction, every tragedy as an opportunity, every room as a stage where they're the only performer that matters. Someone who has confused being famous with being significant. And Meghan Markle is the walking, talking embodiment of that confusion. Chuck Norris died peacefully in his sleep, 84 years old, surrounded by family, a life well lived by any measure. Within 6 hours, his closest friends had organized a private send-off. No press, no cameras, no public announcement, just a few dozen people who actually knew him gathering to share stories, shed tears, and say goodbye properly. The location was shared via private phone calls, not emails, not texts, phone calls, the old-fashioned way, the way you communicate when you actually want to keep something private. Somehow Meghan got the address. Now, let's pause here and really consider this, because getting that information required effort, required calling in favors, required someone in that chain of communication to break trust and leak details to someone who had absolutely no business having them. Meghan didn't stumble onto this information, she hunted for it. She made calls, applied pressure, probably offered incentives, maybe threatened consequences. Because that's what she does, that's her only real talent. Finding the room where power congregates and forcing her way into it. So she gets the address, gets the time, and then comes the truly psychotic part. She decides to go. Not to pay respects from a distance, not to send flowers with a thoughtful note, not to make a donation in Chuck's name. She decides to physically insert herself into a private gathering of people who don't know her, don't like her, and most importantly, didn't invite her. Let's talk about what she wore. Because it matters, with Meghan, it always matters. This wasn't mourning attire, this was a costume, a carefully constructed performance of what she thinks grief looks like when photographed. A black Givenchy dress, fitted, elegant, completely inappropriate for a casual memorial among friends. Heels at a wake, 4-inch stilettos for an event where everyone else wore comfortable shoes because they were actually planning to stand, hug, cry, and be human. Sunglasses, oversized, the kind celebrities wear when they want to be recognized, while pretending they don't want to be recognized. And the makeup, fresh, professional, camera-ready. She didn't dress for a funeral, she dressed for a premiere. Because in Meghan's mind, that's what it was. Another red carpet, another chance to be photographed, another opportunity to remind the world she exists. The car service dropped her off at 7:15 p.m. The memorial had started at 6. She was late, deliberately, because walking in after everyone's settled means all eyes turn to you, means you make an entrance. Except this time the eyes that turned weren't admiring, they were confused, then annoyed, then actively hostile. The first person to recognize her was Jean-Claude Van Damme. He actually did a double take, looked at her, looked at the door, looked back at her, his face cycling through emotions so quickly it was almost comical. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, disgust.
So of course, so, he's made that point, and, a lot of people take notice of what he says. He never makes speeches without giving it an awful lot of thought. And as you know, I like him a lot, and I do feel that he is, he's a statesman as well as our king. He realises that people listen to what he says, and let's hope Donald Trump's out in the Middle East now. Maybe let's hope he can sort of solve some of the problems there. But the king is he thinks about it carefully, and he always injects a bit of humour into it as well.
There was one little joke in there about the late Queen conga line dancing outside Buckingham
exactly.
Palace.
So he always does that to lighten it up a bit. But clever man, yeah.
With all the we've outlined how much trivial news there is with the royals the last couple of weeks, with a doorbell ring cam, dancing at a Beyonce concert. It is very important sometimes to just remember that the royals should tackle serious issues.
Yeah.
And he's done 2 speeches this week. I'm just going to quickly run through the things he said. He said, we should, on VE Day, speaking at this concert, he said, we should rededicate ourselves not only to the cause of freedom, but to renewing global commitments to restoring a peace where there is war, to diplomacy and to the prevention of conflict. Samara, is King Charles the right man to get these messages across? Is he the right person that political leaders will listen to, or people watching on the telly would sit at home, hear this serious message coming from a man like King Charles?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's very, very respected, and he's settled into his role really nicely, actually. I feel like the VE Day speech was one of his best yet, actually. And he is really there to unify everyone. I mean, the royal family has always been like that. But I think what helps with King Charles is the fact that he has been.
He leaned over to Dolph Lundgren and whispered something. Lundgren's head snapped up, stared, whispered to someone else. Within 30 seconds, everyone in the room knew she was there. And nobody, not one single person, got up to greet her. That's the social equivalent of a slap. In Hollywood, where fake enthusiasm is the default currency, nobody even bothered to pretend. Meghan stood there, scanning the room, looking for anyone who might provide an entry point into a conversation. Nothing. Wesley Snipes literally turned his back, made eye contact first, then deliberately slowly turned 180 degrees. The message was clear: you are not welcome here. But Meghan, bless her pathological heart, doesn't speak that language, can't read those signals, or perhaps more accurately, chooses not to. Because acknowledging rejection would mean acknowledging she made a mistake, and Meghan Markle does not make mistakes. The world makes mistakes, other people make mistakes, circumstances conspire against her. But her, never. So she started walking deeper into the room, heading toward the center where Chuck's family sat in a small circle of chairs. She made it maybe 15 feet before Arnold Schwarzenegger stood up. Now, Arnold at 76 is still an imposing figure, still carries himself like the bodybuilder, action star, and governor he's been, still commands a room without saying a word. He didn't approach her, just stood, positioned himself between Meghan and Chuck's family, a human barrier. And waited. Meghan stopped, had to, because walking past Arnold would mean physically pushing past him, and even she isn't that far gone. Can I help you? Arnold's accent makes even polite questions sound like threats. I'm here to pay my respects, Meghan said, voice soft, vulnerable, the Diana imitation she trots out whenever she needs to seem sympathetic. To who? Beat of silence. To Chuck, obviously. You knew Chuck. Well, not personally, but... Then why are you here? And there it is, the question that cuts through all the performance, all the pretense, straight to the rotten core. Why are you here? Meghan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She had no answer, because the real answer, I'm here to be seen, to make connections, to remind Hollywood I exist, can't be said out loud. That's when Stallone appeared at Arnold's shoulder. If Arnold is imposing, Stallone is terrifying. Not because of his size, because of his eyes. The man has seen and done everything, fought every fight, won every war that matters. And he looked at Meghan like she was something that crawled out from under a rock. You need to leave, he said, no preamble, no politeness, just fact. Excuse me, Meghan's voice went up an octave, the victim routine deployed. This is a private event, you weren't invited, you're not wanted, leave. I have every right to be here. No, Stallone interrupted. You don't, this isn't a public memorial, this isn't a networking event, this is friends and family mourning someone they actually knew, you're trespassing. Meghan's face did something interesting, the mask slipped, for just a moment you could see the calculation, the gears turning. Could she cry? Would tears work here? Could she play the persecution card, scream about sexism, racism, whateverism might generate sympathy? She looked around the room, every single face stared back with the same expression. Get out. Even the caterers looked uncomfortable for her. I think there's been a misunderstanding, she tried, stalling, playing for time, hopping someone anyone would...
It draws extra attention to them in a way. Yeah, they're not doing enough work really to make it worthwhile paying these people exorbitant amounts of money. But getting back to this bodyguard guy, it's like she is drawing attention to herself, having this massive guy there who is actually recognizable to the media. You know, when Catherine actually did go and lay flowers for a woman who was killed in London, she did this kind of on her own, and there was a video that came out about it, but it was very much, you know, there weren't like a ton of photographers covering her. There was, you know, because I think the confusing thing with Meghan is that it was only camera people there. Like, there didn't seem to be many citizens there. She didn't walk up with other citizens. It were just cameras. And so it's like, well, what are you doing there? But Catherine, it was a vigil for this woman who was killed in London. Catherine, who spent much of her young adulthood in London, oftentimes walking by herself at night or during the day, and she was harassed by photographers a lot because that was kind of during the heyday of the paparazzi. And so she was followed and harassed, and this woman was killed in London. She was killed by actually a police officer, and so it was a huge tragedy, huge outrage, and there was this vigil area where people from the public could gather to mourn and kind of recognize the danger that women face sometimes in, you know, a city like London. And so she came there in a personal capacity, and there was a video that emerged, but it was not like, you could tell it was a camera phone video. You could tell that, you know, either you could give her, you know, say maybe a staff member of hers took it. However, it looked enough like she was just in the crowd in general that you could have the illusion that she just did it completely personally. As I understand it, it was actually a journalist who kind of saw her there and recognized her. But when she's walking away especially, you couldn't recognize her. And the most important thing, the most interesting thing...
...intervene on her behalf. Nobody moved. The only misunderstanding, Stallone said, voice dropping lower, is you thinking you could walk in here uninvited and nobody would say anything. That stopped working for you 2 years ago. We're done pretending. You need to go right now. He gestured to the security team positioned near the entrance. 2 men, both built like industrial refrigerators, started walking toward her. And that's when Meghan played her final card. "Do you know who I am?" 5 words that have ended more careers in Hollywood than cocaine and embezzlement combined. Because everyone in that room absolutely knew who she was. The woman who married a prince and couldn't handle the job. The woman who cried to Oprah about how hard it is to live in a palace. The woman who bullied staff and then claimed victimhood when called out. The woman who has spent 7 years playing dress-up as a humanitarian while doing absolutely nothing of substance. They knew exactly who she was. That was the problem. Stallone smiled, not with warmth, with the kind of cold satisfaction that comes from finally saying what everyone's been thinking. "Yes, sweetheart, we know exactly who you are, that's why we want you gone." He nodded to security. They moved in, professional, calm, arms extended to guide, not grab. "Ma'am, please come with us." Meghan looked around desperately, looking for allies, for anyone who might object to her removal. Wesley Snipes was checking his phone. Van Damme was suddenly fascinated by the ceiling. Arnold had already returned to his seat. Even the people who might have felt sorry for her, and there had to be a few, human decency being what it is, stayed silent. Because Hollywood runs on social currency, and being the person who defended Meghan Markle in that moment would have cost more than anyone was willing to pay. The security team escorted her to the door, not roughly, but firmly, with the kind of professional courtesy that somehow makes it worse. As they reached the entrance, Meghan turned back, one last attempt to salvage something from the disaster. "This is disgraceful," she announced to the room. "Chuck Norris stood for honor and respect. None of you are honoring his memory by treating me like this." The room stayed silent for 3 long seconds. Then someone laughed, a short, sharp bark of genuine amusement. Then someone else. Within seconds, half the room was chuckling, not cruelly, just at the absurdity, at the sheer audacity of someone who crashed a funeral lecturing the deceased's actual friends about respect. Meghan's face went white, then red, then white again. She turned and walked out under her own power. Pride wouldn't let her be physically removed. The door closed behind her. Inside, someone started clapping, slowly, then others joined. Within seconds, Sylvester Stallone was receiving a standing ovation. Not for removing Meghan, for doing what everyone in Hollywood has wanted to do for years. Saying no out loud in public with witnesses. The memorial continued, stories were shared, tears were shed. Chuck was properly honored by people who actually loved him. Meghan sat in her rental car for 20 minutes, engine off, just sitting, trying to process what happened. Because in her carefully constructed reality, this outcome wasn't possible. She was the Duchess, she was special, she was entitled to access, to deference, to respect. And for the first time in her adult life, none of that mattered. Titles don't work in Hollywood, not British ones anyway. You can't curtsy your way into power here, can't demand respect based on who you married. You earn it through work, through talent, through actually giving a damn about something other than yourself. And Meghan has earned nothing. Her team went into overdrive, called friendly journalists, planted stories. Sources close to the Duchess reported that she'd been verbally assaulted and physically intimidated by threatened men. But too many people were there, too many real witnesses with real credibility. The truth leaked within hours, not through tabloids, through industry insiders, through the whisper network that actually runs Hollywood. By midnight everyone knew, by morning it was legend. Meghan Markle crashed Chuck Norris's memorial. Sylvester Stallone personally threw her out. She embarrassed herself in front of everyone who matters. The invitations that were already scarce, they stopped completely. The meetings that were already awkward, they got cancelled. The career that was already circling the drain, it finally went under. Because Hollywood forgives a lot, forgives addiction, forgives affairs, forgives even criminal behavior if you're talented enough. But it doesn't forgive desperation, doesn't forgive social climbing, doesn't forgive showing up uninvited to a funeral because you're so irrelevant you'll take any opportunity for exposure. That's not ambition, that's pathology. And Sylvester Stallone performed a public service that night. He showed everyone else it's okay to say no, okay to set boundaries, okay to reject the narrative that Meghan Markle is special, is important, is deserving of access she hasn't earned. She's not. She's a former cable television actress who married well and learned nothing. And now, finally, Hollywood sees her for what she is. An uninvited guest, an unwelcome presence, a woman so desperate for relevance she'll gatecrash a dead man's memorial. Most places, when you humiliate yourself publicly, you disappear for a while, lie low, let the wounds heal, wait for the news cycle to move on. But in Hollywood, shame is supposed to be impossible. You're supposed to brazen through anything, spin it, rebrand it. Turn your lowest moment into a Netflix special about resilience. That's the game, that's how it's always been played. And then Meghan Markle tried to crash Chuck Norris's memorial service. What happened next wasn't just rejection, it was something far more devastating. It was the moment Hollywood collectively decided that some people are beyond redemption, beyond second chances, beyond the carefully maintained fiction that everyone deserves a seat at the table. Meghan Markle became the first person in modern Hollywood history to be declared unfixable. Let me walk you through how we got here. Because this story doesn't start with Chuck Norris dying, it doesn't even start with Meghan leaving the royal family.